This is the Asics Gel-Cumulus 24, and this year it's getting FF Blast, the same exciting foam featured in the Novablast. But is this enough to revive a shoe that may have been getting a bit long in the tooth? Let's lace up the Cumulus 24 and take them for a run. 8.46 miles in 8 minutes 46 seconds per mile and 139 beats per minute on average today. Going for a nice and easy run with some strides thrown in, a perfect way to test the Cumulus 24. Now, this is actually my second run in this shoe. I did go on a run in earlier in the week, but that run got cut a little bit short because I had to go suddenly pick up my daughter at school. She wasn't feeling well. Everything's fine now. But on the plus side, what that did mean was I did get to put in a couple of faster miles. I had to rush to get over to the school to pick her up. So I feel like I've done a pretty good amount of first run or first impressions testing, and I can't wait to tell you all about my thoughts on this shoe. But before I do want to go over some disclosures. Now, while no one's paying me to make this video and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before this video goes up on YouTube, I do feel like I should say, in addition to the fact that I received this pair of shoes for review purposes for free from Asics, I have also been doing a lot of work with Asics on a variety of different projects. So there's plenty of opportunity for bias in there, but I just want to remind you guys also that the point of a disclosure is not to prove that somehow I can master some sort of weird running shoe purity test, but to show you and tell you about all the potential for biases there may be when I present some of my opinions on a video. You can use that as you weigh the potential credibility of my opinions. So with that disclosure and reminder out of the way, let's talk about the Gel-Cumulus 24. First, let's talk about what some of the stats are for this shoe as we go over some of the specs. I believe this is a 24 millimeter stack height shoe. The only real change from last year stack height wise, as far as I understand, is that instead of a 10 millimeter drop that they had last year, it's now an 8 millimeter drop. And so there's 2 extra millimeters of midsole foam in the forefoot, very similar to the changes that we saw going from Novablast 1 to Novablast 2. And just like the Novablast 2, in this midsole in the Cumulus, we have FF Blast. It's that exciting foam that we've all come to love from the Asics lineup, and we've been asking them when are they going to start putting it into more shoes, and they're finally doing it here. But there's more than just FF Blast in this midsole. It's still a Gel-Cumulus after all, and so there's visual gel in the heel here, and then there's another kind of donut ring of gel that you can't see towards the pads of the feet in the forefoot. There's no trustic system as far as I can tell in this shoe, but we do have this extra other kind of color of foam, which is not just a different color for aesthetic purposes. I think it's intended not so much for cushioning as you're running, but for providing a little bit of guide rails and stability as your foot hits the ground. As far as the outsole is concerned, we've got some major changes compared to what we've seen last year, but if you've been running in the Nimbus Lite series or in the Nimbus 24 from this year, this is going to be a very familiar pattern and a pattern that certainly works. They're using that AHAR Plus outsole, which is a highly durable but very lightweight rubber compound that provides plenty of grip, but it's also cut through here so that way the shoe can still bend and has plenty of flex grooves. We do have a lot of exposed midsole foam here, however, but the thickness of the outsole here does provide enough protection so you're not really running directly on it. The one thing that I will note that's different from the Nimbus 24, for example, is that there is an extra little pad of rubber that's underneath the arch of the foot, and I think again, just like with the way that there's this extra color of different foam in the midsole, I think features like this are intended to provide just a little bit more stability on the medial side of the foot so it doesn't come caving in quite so much. Overall though, it's not a stability shoe. It definitely still is a neutral shoe, but something that I did find is during my running, it did feel like there was just a little bit more stability, maybe like a mini hint of stability in the shoe just to keep everything from getting a little bit too squirrely with this relatively squishy the FF Blast foam. Moving to the upper, we have a jacquard mesh, which is nice and stretchy. I really love what Asics has been doing with their uppers with this mesh material. It's kind of like a mix between like a mesh and like a knit. It kind of sits in that in-between space. It's very lightweight, very breathable, and it kind of sits on top of the foot really nicely, so you don't feel like the upper is kind of binding your foot in by any means at all. Instead, it just feels nice and comfortable on top. For the tongue, they've gone with a rather traditional tongue, and it's got a little bit of padding in it to protect the foot from any pressure that might be coming down from the laces, and some of that cushioning continues out throughout the heel cup back here, where there is probably a little bit more cushion that I would normally look for when I'm looking at, say, a daily trainer like this shoe is. There is a pretty decent amount of stability in this heel cup too. There's some rigid elements in here that help, again, keep all things locked into place and prevent them from sliding around. Altogether, this shoe came in at a weight that I measured on my scale at 9.8 ounces or 280 grams. Let's talk about what it was like to run in the shoe. The fit on the upper is superb. I really love the stretchiness of this soft mesh that Asics has been using in the shoes. It just seems to be getting better and better with each shoe that Asics releases, and I feel like this one really works well for me. I went with my normal size 9. It fits excellently, and I didn't have any problems with fit right out of the box. Now, this shoe for me is definitely a daily trainer, and I think it is a pretty fantastic one. I think it's got a lot of versatility to it as well. I took it out on some easy miles on the day that I had to go pick up my daughter. I did pick up the pace quite a bit to closer to a moderate pace, and I think it did a really nice job of getting up to speed and staying there. And today, even on some of the strides that I had closer towards a mile race pace, not quite there, but getting closer to that range. And I felt like the shoe did well in all those different ranges of speed. So I feel like it's a shoe that you could reach for just about any kind of workout that you may have, and it's going to do a pretty good job. The FF Blast midsole foam here does a really nice job of being spongy and absorbing impact from the road, but also being nice and springy and having a nice sense of liveliness as your foot pushes off the ground. The one thing that I will say is because of the gel that's in here and some of these other kind of elements that provide a little bit more stability, I felt like the shoe wasn't quite as lively as, say, the Novablast 2 in its pure FF Blast configuration, but I did feel like the two shoes had a lot of similarities that I found to be really pleasant. In fact, the best way I think that I can explain the Cumulus 24 for someone who has maybe never tried a Cumulus before, but has experience with the Novablast, is that if you felt like the Novablast was a little bit too squishy, or maybe it allowed a little bit too much movement in terms of the way your foot was hitting the ground, then the Cumulus 24 might be exactly the shoe that you're looking for, because it has a lot of those Novablast-like features, but with that gel in the heel and in the forefoot, and with some of those guide rail type of features that they're utilizing with the way they're sculpting some of this foam. I felt like it was a little bit more stable of a shoe while still providing kind of like hints and flavors of that squishiness that I got in the Novablast 2. I think that the other shoe that it can definitely be compared against is the Nimbus 24 that I also recently reviewed. And both of these shoes are new for this year, 2022. And you can certainly see the design language that carries through both of these shoes. In fact, for me, it's hard at first glance to kind of figure out which shoe is which. There's some very subtle differences with the amount and the placement of the gel that's in the heel. And when you look closely at the foams, you can really see that there are two different foams here. And I think that by having these two shoes that are very similar in kind of the way that they're set up and structured, you're getting a really good sense of what the differences are between these two foams, the FF Blast Plus in the Nimbus 24 and the FF Blast that's in the Cumulus 24. So if you've tried the Nimbus 24, what you'll feel is that it is a very squishy, very bouncy foam, indeed bouncier and squishier than the FF Blast foam was even in the Novablast 2. That's something that I definitely feel. But there's also still gel in the Nimbus 24, and there's a truss stick system that's in here as well, which again prevents the shoe from kind of wobbling around too much as your foot hits the ground and takes off for that next stride. With the Cumulus 24, what I'm feeling is a little bit more of a speed-oriented package compared to the Nimbus 24. I feel like the shoe responds to kind of the inputs that I'm putting into it a little better than the Nimbus 24 does. So if I do have pace changes that I want to put into the run, I feel like the Cumulus 24 is very willing to pick up the pace, and I feel like it does a really good job of getting up to moderate pace and even a little bit faster and just staying there and feeling really comfortable. I think the other shoe that it could be compared to in the lineup would be the Nimbus Lite 3. Now, the differences between the Nimbus Lite 3 and the Nimbus 24 are a little bit more subtle. There isn't the Trustix system in the Nimbus Lite 3, and it is a different foam. And so one of the things that they're doing in order to get rid of that Trustix system is they're going with Flight foam, which is a little bit firmer of a material. It's a little bit older, kind of in like the Asics repertoire of foams. It's something that's been around for a little bit of a longer time. The Nimbus Lite 3, though, uses a more eco-friendly version of the Flight foam, so it's a little bit more environmentally friendly while still retaining all the same benefits of that Flight foam. Not FF Blast, not FF Blast Plus, but FF or Flight foam, midsole foam. And so I think that the best way to describe the Cumulus 24, if you're familiar with the Nimbus Lite 3 and the Nimbus 24, is that it kind of fits like somewhere in the middle. So the Nimbus Lite 3 is a little bit firmer of a shoe, and it has a bit of a wider platform to land on. So its kind of stability, even though it also is a neutral shoe, all these shoes are neutral shoes, its stability derives from kind of the wide footprint, the wide base that it has, and it has a little bit firmer of a foam, so it's not going to squish and move around on you too much. The FF Blast Plus in the Nimbus 24 is very squishy and can move around a lot, but relies on a Trustix system and the gel to help keep it from getting too squirrely underfoot. In the middle, the Goldilocks of these three shoes, if you will, is the Cumulus 24. It has kind of like the, I guess, more moderately squishy foam, and it still has some gel in here as well as some of the other features in terms of the design and sculpting of the foam to help it be a little bit more secure underfoot. So I feel like with the Cumulus 24, you're getting something that seems to be a bit more than the mere sum of its parts. As I was running it, it reminded me very much of one of my other favorite but underrated daily trainers from last year, the 880 version 11 from New Balance. I feel like this is definitely going to stack up right against it as a quiet, understated workhorse in the rotation that is going to over deliver on your expectations. I'm really excited with how the Cumulus 24 has been treating me so far for easy miles, moderate miles, and some strides as well. I think this is something that I'm going to start bringing out for some of those earlier workouts as I'm recovering from my last marathon and starting to ramp up and get ready for the next one. A lot of those first workouts are kind of like just intro to speed, touching speed again, getting used to moving the legs quickly again, while still having a lot of easy miles. I feel like in this time, the Cumulus 24 is something that I'm very much going to be reaching for on a regular basis. So those are my thoughts on the Cumulus 24 after just a couple of runs. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. Before I forget, I want to remind you guys that this weekend, the Kofuzi Run Club is meeting in Washington, DC. We're going to do a shakeout run meeting at the World War II Memorial. We'll run around the mall and the Tidal Basin area where a lot of the cherry blossoms are, getting a preview of the cherry blossom 10-mile route. A lot of you guys, I think, are going to be racing the event on Sunday. I'm going to be racing it as well. Very excited to be in DC this time of year. I don't think I've ever seen the cherry blossoms in bloom in person, so I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you guys on Saturday. I'll post a link to the Strava group event in the description down below so you can get further details exactly to when and where and all that other kind of information. Hopefully I'll be able to see you guys in person. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?